Hello and welcome back to another Bionicle 2015 set preview. Today I have with me set number 70785, Pohatu, Master of Stone. Now, before we get into this video, I'd like to preface this by stating that this is, yet again, another Comic-Con build, and what this means is that this is essentially a mock we created using the pieces we received at the VIP Bionicle party hosted at the Flatiron LEGO store. And because of this, there may be a few differences between this particular build and the final retail version of the set. As such, we will be going over a few pros and cons of this particular build, but whether those pros and cons actually translate to the final retail version will be covered in a separate review once the retail version has been released to the public in January. But with that out of the way, let's get started. So, as with the other Toa, Pohatu here features yet another example of the new gearbox system that LEGO has introduced with the new Bionicle line. Now, Pohatu's gearbox system is fairly standard fare. It's not that complicated, and there really isn't much to it as far as design goes. However, this is the second set that I have reviewed that includes a locking mechanism. And what this means is that one arm is locked in place while the other one is functioned by the gear, just like Kopaka. And you can see that piece right here. Essentially what it does is just it replaces the gear in the gearbox, where usually you put a gear here, instead you've placed this locking piece. So, one arm is maneuvered by the function, whereas the other one is strictly a ball joint. As per usual, the gearbox works fairly well. The function is nice. It's great to see these back and a nice callback to the original 01 sets. And thanks to the added friction here in the smaller joints in the back of his head, the arm does a fairly good job of maintaining all sorts of poses without flopping around like the original 01 sets did. And this is really nice to see that LEGO is able to combine both posability and functionality. This is really, really great playability-wise. Now, one of the more intriguing things I found with Pohatu's build in particular is the use of these standard arm joints here. Typically, with most CCBS systems, we usually see the knee joint, which you can see kind of here in the back of his leg here. That adds the nice knee articulation without really allowing much room for side articulation. But here, we're not really limited by that, and it makes me wonder why LEGO doesn't actually use this on more sets. Because it really does free up a lot of articulation for Pohatu. His arms can perform full 360 without anything getting in the way. And it allows for a lot more posability. And this can be seen on both arms here. Pohatu also includes some really, really awesome trans lime green pieces. Now, initially I thought these were just yellow, but it does appear that they are trans lime green, which is really cool. I'm not sure if we've actually seen these pieces before, so I'm a really big fan of them. It's almost as if his color scheme is taking inspiration from not only sand, but also sulfur, and that is quite an awesome use of his element here. Now, overall, Pohatu's actual build is probably the most standard of all the Toa. I get the feeling that his design is slightly less inspired than the rest of them, which makes me wonder if Pohatu was one of the first sets they designed and kind of based the others around this system. But despite the lack of intricacy that all the other Toa may have possessed, I do still feel like Pohatu has a very strong uniqueness to him, and that does help him stand out amongst all the other Toa. But this does leave him as the smallest set of them all, which really isn't anything new to Pohatu. He's pretty used to getting the shorter end of the stick as far as height is concerned. Now, one of the big playability features of Pohatu in the years is that he has a nice kick functionality in all his older sets, and I like that they've kind of retained this notion by giving him some cool leg armor boot design here. It's actually pretty neat. It makes his legs look pretty beefy, and that's a nice character trait I'm glad carried over. Now, unfortunately, I do not have any of the Fantocco or Mystica sets on me, and I know a lot of people have been requesting to see that in the lineup. Sorry, guys. I wish I had them so I could show it off, but alas, alas. Now, with that comparison between the older sets, you can kind of see that Pohatu is using a new shade of brown. Well, not really new. This is, in fact, the same dark orange that we saw with Huhi, and that's pretty cool to see return, and I feel like that actually works better for Pohatu's color scheme, and gives his color a bit more vibrancy. And I actually think he does a great job of balancing that out. I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of the asymmetricality between his arms, but I'm actually quite fond of it. I think it looks pretty nice, and I think it helps balance out his colors a bit more. And unlike a lot of the other sets, I feel like the gunmetal gray actually really works with this shade of brown, and the trans lime green adds a lot of unique highlighting. And here's another look at his gearbox system, and as with all the other Toa, it is comprised of two particular builds, one using the initial HF torso to attach all the armor plating to, and then the other to attach his arms and the gearbox system to. Now, one thing about Pohatu's build I'm not exactly sure how to feel about are these little added detailing here to his forearm plating. It's, I guess, unique. I'm not really sure how well that shows up on the camera. And I guess it's unique, but, I don't know. It's a little oddly positioned. Seems kind of randomly placed here, and there's no other white on his body to really distribute that color, so it's kind of just there. But I guess it does give him a bit more uniqueness and adds to his piece count. So, I guess that is something. Now, one of the big things about this version of Pohatu is that he actually includes his own dedicated weapons this time. And that's another department where Pohatu's been kind of given the short end of the stick. His weapons haven't always been as refined as the other Toa. And it's pretty nice to see that he actually has some unique stuff this time. With this set, we have some nice looking boomerangs here that can kind of double up as blades. And they can, in fact, fold up. So they also kind of double up as claws, too. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of their design. I think they're a little meh. But it is really cool that LEGO has gone out of the way to actually give Pohatu something to use. But that's not all they do, because as with all the other Toa, Pohatu features an adrenaline mode. Now, his is a lot more simple than, say, Liwa's, for example, because his boomerangs just kind of pop off of his hands and pop apart and clip on to the bottom of his feet to form some cool boomerang jet boots. And by adding the complementary golden Mask of Stone, you've got Pohatu in full-on adrenaline mode. Now, Pohatu also comes with a complimentary Skull Spider, and this is yet another Metru Blue one. However, the interesting thing about this Skull Spider in particular is that he actually comes with an extra leg piece to form a stinger. Now this is intriguing. I get the feeling there's a reason for this, and something tells me it has a little to do with Minog, and the fact that Pohatu in particular had some history with some scorpions.
Normally when people have a party, they raise the roof, but they're not having a Pohatu party. Because they're gonna bring the house down! Yeah!
And that's something I'm going to get in a little bit more when I record my overview of all the sets in particular, so stay tuned for that. But as such, this is a pretty cool addition and a callback to the original 01 story, and I feel like that was very intentional. And as with all the Skull Spiders, this one can, in fact, attach to his head and take over, like so. Once again, I'm still not exactly positive how LEGO wants this to attach. In some instances, I've seen pictures with the Skull Spider on without the bottom legs, and that definitely seems like the way to go, because these legs typically get in the way as far as the torso goes. But it is a little odd that the spider would have to detach its legs to attach to his face. That doesn't really seem like a great plan in the long run. And with the added mechanism, Pohatu can launch the spider off his face, as well as his mask. Now, in Adrenaline mode, Pohatu also has a backup weapon, and that is the included Rakshi Gurok blade here, which is a little cool, I guess. It's just a tiny little dagger, not really that threatening or anything, but it is nice to see Pohatu having some extra backup when he needs it. But that's pretty much it for Pohatu, and despite being the smallest of the Toa, I still feel like he packs a pretty big punch. He definitely has a lot of uniqueness going to him, despite being fairly standard as far as build goes. And overall, I feel like he is a nice evolution between the originals, and it's great to see that his character still carries over to this set. And hopefully the same can be said for our next set. Set number 70789, Onua, Master of Earth. Oh, hey, look at that. I put the armor on backwards. How did that happen? Whoops. Haha.